as a dad, we can learn the things that then will flow down to them, but we also need to take care of our health. We need to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for community side of it, spiritually, physically, financially, because if we're not in the fight, then who's in the fight for them? We have a holistic life. There's lots of different things that come into our experience. We want to be capable and willing to go and execute well for all those things.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nicky Ballou. We have a very special guest here for you today, Zach Reeser, host of the Skill Dad Podcast. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you, Nicky. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you on, brother. So, Zach, tell the folks how you came to get involved in the men's space and what had you start the Skill Dad Podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I'll do my best to give you the short version, because probably like a lot of stories about where we got to. There's a long version and short version. So the short version is this: when I was having my first kid, my buddy and I we were both kind of the first in our group to have kids, and so we were looking around to say, hey, where's info on being a dad from dads? And so we asked the ladies, because they always seem to be connected, and they would all point us to a couple of different areas where, you could have information is for dads, is about a lot about baby gear and things like that. And ultimately the guys that they point us to weren't dads. So we're kind of like, there's a shortage here and we don't quite subscribe to that message. So let's go start our own thing. And we lived in Colorado at the time. So, we said, hey, we're going to start a podcast. And this is before there was like 5 million podcasts like there is now. And we're going to call it Baby Daddy CO2, because we're about to be baby daddies. We live in Colorado and we're both full of hot air. It just seemed to line up. So we were going to build this thing. And the short version of it is we had grand plans, but the execution was poor and we didn't launch anything. So fast forward, about a year later, and I was in business and traveling. So every week on an airplane. And I was looking more at, okay, we didn't do that. So with my lifestyle, what can I do to help equip dads that are business travelers? Because if you're gone a lot, there's a lot of different things. So anybody listening that's in that world, there's glamour sides and there's dark sides. And so like, hey, how can I help fortify those men so they can still be effective at home? So I launched like a very beta version of that. And ultimately I stopped that because my result was to not do it anymore. So I made a career shift, stopped traveling. And then the V3 is Skill Dad. And this has been going for now a couple of years. And ultimately at the end of the day, what we're looking to do is help equip men with the knowledge, and skills that they can learn that then they can apply so that they can gain confidence in their dad game, gain confidence in who they are, build a good community around them, and ultimately be equipped so they can pass that along to this next generation that's going to lead the world. So that's what we do. We do it through our podcast. We do it through website, somewhat on social. So anybody that's really good at social, hit me up. But that's the high level and the short version of the genesis of Skill Dad Podcast.
So what sorts of issues do you dive into on the podcast?
Yeah. So we really have covered a gambit.
Yeah. Give me a good example of one or two.
Well, let me give you an example of a recent one. So I went back and listened to a couple of your episodes. And I think at the time of recording, it was 2 episodes ago, I think, where you guys were talking about the change in dynamics in the market between white collar and what I'll call blue collar jobs. and the future of, hard skill careers and where that could lend to. So I had a gentleman with me named Mark Hedstrom, and he is executive VP for Skilled Careers Coalition. And they're doing some really cool stuff focused on kids and teaching kids about hard skill. It's an introduction to hard skill, opportunities and just getting into that. So we really kind of opened the door to some of the different opportunities that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. That's part one. So, things to consider future careers for our kids, how to go about preparing for college if college is in the future. Maybe it's not, because a lot of people don't want to leave with $130,000 debt with a psych degree. So some of those future oriented things, but then also on the skilled side of it, I mean, podcast is not so much like we can, verbally interpretive dance how to use a hammer and a saw. It's more of some of the soft skills that we can deploy around leadership, finance, listening. And a lot of that comes through the stories of either failures or successes of other dads. And what we found is when somebody hears it, and maybe they're in this, sovereign, we're on Sovereign Man podcast, right? So if we are capable and independent when we need to be, we can hold our own, we can make it happen. At the same time, we don't necessarily want to be isolated, because there's a huge miss in opportunity for growth, because you're going to strengthen me, I'm going to learn from you, you're going to strengthen me, and vice versa. So when we hear that story through the anonymity of a podcast and the safety of a podcast, so to speak, other guys have said, I thought I was the only one that was dealing with that thing, and I just learned from Josh or Mark or whoever's on the podcast, and then they can actually deploy that in their own life. And there's been some cool things that have come from it.
Cool.
Lots of words.
So how long have you been a dad for?
Officially just over 9 years, because I have a almost 10-year-old son. So I've got 3 kids. I've got a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Wow. That's pretty darn cool.
It's fun, man.
The podcast, you bring issues that fathers are dealing with. So a lot of times, newer fathers, they don't really have a group, a community of men that they can go to and get good advice from on how not to fuck up and screw up their kids. And it strikes me that podcasts like yours can deliver that sort of thing. Do you ever talk about what are things fathers ought to avoid doing with their kids, especially fathers with sons, so that they do a good job with their kids and they don't screw them up too badly? They don't give them incorrect upbringing, because an incorrect upbringing can really set these kids up to fail. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? How do you go about dealing with those issues? Because this is a big thing you've taken on. It's not a small thing.
No, it's not. And at the end of the day, if you're afraid that you're going to screw your kid up in some way, I guess my challenge to you is don't be afraid of it, because it's guaranteed that you will in some way, because we're fallible and we're learning our own path. And at the end, we can tell them all that we want, but there's a common phrase that I've heard, a number of times, which is more is caught than taught. And so through stories of more is caught than taught.
What does that mean exactly?
So what that means is they're watching you, right? They're watching what you do. They're watching how you interact with people. They're watching, you might say, hey, do X, but then on the same time, you're doing Y. You're doing the complete opposite. And so what are they actually learning? So they're catching those things from you. And this is a common thing that pops up, is that if you want to see what some of your opportunities for growth are, just watch your kids enough, because you're going to start seeing an action from them. And you're like, what is this nonsense? Well, this is ridiculous. And then you're going to realize, yeah, I do that. I do that too. And so it's not, it's a skilled dad. And let me just talk about real quick, why skilled dad? And this means a number of different things to different people. For years, there's been a stigma in many circles about, fatherhood and kind of like a dads or duds kind of perspective. You've got your Homer Simpsons, you got your Al Bundys, you've got just this goofy.
I love Al Bundy.
He's great, but I don't want to be him, and so like some of that has, I think there's created a conflict. I know you talk a lot about masculinity and manhood, and there's this conflict of like, okay, what am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? And if people haven't had that figure around, or multiple figures, I mean, not just your dad, but the group of men that maybe you've had around you in your life, right? You talked about a lot of guys don't have that group around them. Well, that's really important for us, but it's also really important for our kids. The ultimate goal is continuously strive, like intentionally and forcefully drive towards gaining some of those new skills that are going to fortify us, and then also allow us the opportunity to teach them, or they can see it and catch it because we are modeling it for them. And we really do focus. It's not all about just being dad, because just because we have kids and become dad doesn't mean we stop being a man and who we are. But who we are is a force multiplier in being dad. So I'll use the analogy quite a bit. Like, if for those that have flown often, you start to not listen to it because you hear it enough. But when you're going through the pre-flight procedures and all of a sudden they say, hey, if there happen to be turbulence and the masks fall down, if you happen to have kids, what do? You put the mask on yourself first and then put it on them. Well, why is that? Because if you're trying to put it on them and you have a massive deceleration or just the oxygen goes out and you black out, you're all screwed. And so as a dad, we can learn the things that then will flow down to them, but we also need to take care of our health. We need to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for community side of it, spiritually, physically, financially, because if we're not in the fight, then who's in the fight for them? And so we hit on topics that really kind of go all the way around in a holistic manner, because we have a holistic life. There's lots of different things that come into our experience. And at the end of the day, like being a sovereign man, we want to be capable and willing to go and execute well for all those things. May not be a master in all of them, but we want to be able to execute well.
I like what you're saying here about being capable and willing. A father's job is really to be capable and willing. Mm-hmm. I think that's really, really important. So your eldest is a 9-year-old son. Mm-hmm. What are the things that are on your mind when it comes to raising your son right now, getting him out of this boy stage, which he's in, which is 9, getting him to the teenage stage, which is coming sooner than you think, mm-hmm. And then getting him ready for manhood? What are the things that are on your mind right now?
Oh, yeah. Great question. Lots of them. I want to answer that. Before I do, there's one other component that goes to the capable and willing that I would add. And I, honestly, this is the same thing I used in my hiring process over the last 15 years. You want to find somebody that can they do the job? And if they can't, what is it going to take for them to be able to do the job? So capability. Willing. If I ask them, like, are they going to do it? Are they willing to do it? And then the third thing, which really is the multiplier for the other two, is do they want to? Do you want to do this job? Do you want to be a dad? Because if you don't want to, but you're maybe willing to, the amount of effectiveness and impact that you're going to have, even though you can and you're willing, but you don't really want to, you're going to miss out on the opportunity to really be truly effective and enjoy it. So those are the three things I'd throw out there. But as far as my oldest, and I get to, the first kid in my experience and several discussions I've had, they're like the grand experiment, because when you first start out, we don't get a manual. We do have podcasts like the Dad Edge podcast, like Dad's Making a Difference with Cam Hall, like Mediocre Dads with Quan Wilcox, Skill Dad podcast. There's more out there now, which I'm so thankful for. Go listen to all of them. But we don't get a manual, but we can learn from others. But in that first one, there's a lot of trial and error, a lot of test and iterate. And we just hope that, they're going to turn out okay. By the third one, at least for us, it's like something fell on the floor. It's like, blow it off. You'll be fine. Right. You fell down. Okay. You fell down from not too far up. You're fine. Get up. But for him, because he is the first and have the opportunity to learn from a lot of other great dudes. My thought is consistently, what am I showing him now? Because he actually gets it now. And in reflection on the podcast you had of, I don't know how many episodes back, about PBD's perspective on kind of the phases of childhood and relationship with their father.
Yeah.
It's like, hey,
the stages of the father-son relationship.
There you go. When you look at that, it's like, okay, I can tell as he's starting to actually understand more. Now, what are the things that I can bring him into more with a deeper level of context and understanding? Because we still want to protect him from, we want him to be a kid. Like, I don't want to dive into politics, but this obviously in the US has been a political season and it's everywhere. And so like these 9-year-olds are talking about it at school, but they don't have the appropriate context. Right. So at what level do we bring him into the awesome process of what it means to...
Your son's talking politics with you? He's talking election with you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it comes from school.
What's his thoughts on it?
Well, this is more curiosity, right? And again, that they don't have the context of full understanding, but they know enough to be like, well, what is this and what happened here? So what I choose to focus on is, when we look at our system, the importance of being involved, especially within local community, within what's going on, and the opportunity that you have to have a voice currently. And like, that's what we want to focus on, not so much all the drama that things have somewhat become, but more of, hey, how is this a thing that we all as a country, and he's brought this up and I was like, yeah, that's awesome, dude. It's e pluribus unum, right? Out of many, one. It's not one into many, it's many come into one. That's, that's kind of the thought that we have. And that's what I love about the dad space is like, look, and for anybody listening, it's not a dad yet, but you want to be. When you're a dad, you're going to understand something that someone else that's not a dad is not going to understand. And so there's a common bond that we have as dads, regardless of political opinion, regardless of religious side of it, that we can understand something about each other. And that's the kind of the banner that we gather around for my podcast, is that we're all dads. We get into this thing together, and then we can learn from each other and hopefully be better from it. But for him, my big focus is, what are the things I can bring him into? What's the layers of context of life that I can help reveal to him? What are the hard skills that I want to teach him? Right. So there's the soft side of it, which is leadership, listening, how to treat his sister, how to talk to his mom, other adults in society. There's the hard skills. Like, he can actually run a drill quite well now, which I'm pretty happy about. Mowing the yard, importance of taking care of things. And then there's the bigger question of, what are the things that I can go and do and plan for now? Because to your point, it's going to go quick. What are the things that I can go and do and plan for that are going to be milestones in his life, that by the time he gets to be 18, that he knows he's a man. And so that's what I've got something planned for his, 10th birthday, and, just some solo time with him and I, and just, building on those kind of the milestones, the manhood. And there was a conversation I had with a gentleman that spent time with an Aboriginal group in Australia. And he said something that I was like, ooh, I like that. And that was it. For the Aboriginal tribes out there, it's not it's not the dad's job to make the son a man. It's not my job to make my son a man. It is my job to get him ready for it. And who he becomes as a man is going to be stuff that he takes from me. And it's also going to be stuff that he takes from the other men in his life, whether it be coaches, teachers, my friends. So he'll take those things and then form his own identity. And I thought that was pretty powerful, which then also just put an exclamation point on the fact that I need to make sure that my circle is a strong circle so that he can have strong men around him that aren't me to go and learn from, because somebody else is going to bring something to the game that I just don't bring or bring as well. And so he's going to learn from that. It's a big job, but I love it.
It's interesting you talk about your circle. What is your circle? Have you got a circle that you've deliberately curated? I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I can tell you right now, I have a circle, and I have kind of layers of a circle. If you look at a bullseye, you've got kind of different layers that would come into the core. So I've got my core guys that I'm going to steal a phrase from Scott Johnson. Great episode. Go listen to that. But they're like my refrigerator friends. Some of them are local with me. Some of them are not. They live states away from, just relationships that we developed a while ago. But these are the kind of guys that come into your house and they go in your refrigerator and they take something out and they make a sandwich or drink a beer or whatever, and you just don't care. Like, those are your guys. And then you've got the next layer who, you're having coffee with, you're hanging out with. So I've got like 4 guys that are my close refrigerator friends that just constant communication, encourage each other, and kick each other in the ass too. I think that's really important. You can't just always surround yourself with yes men. You need people that are going to be able to kind of keep you in check. So I have that circle now, and I will tell you that there was a good period where I was so focused on my career and my, quote unquote, providing for my family that in that pursuit, I completely isolated myself. And for me, it wasn't. What's that?
What was that like, to completely isolate yourself? Yeah.
I mean, I think to say completely isolated probably is inaccurate, but what I'd say, because I was surrounded by people all the time. But because of what I was doing and traveling all the time, I felt more comfortable sleeping in hotels than I did in my own house for a good period, because I was 8 years of every week, traveling. You get your routine and you do your thing. But in that
8 years every week you traveled for work.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few stints where I was home a couple weeks, but I think the longest I was home without traveling during that time period was probably the longest period was probably 3 weeks, but the majority of the time it was every week. We would have like one office week a quarter.
Were you married during this period?
Yeah. I got married, and then 6 months later I got promoted, moved across the country, and started flying.
And how did your wife feel about that?
Well, remember how I talked about I changed careers? That's a big part of it. So, I mean, the first few years of it is fun, right? It's the glamorous travel business, travel lifestyle, and you got your
But points. How did your wife feel about it? What did she have to say about that?
At first it was cool, but I would say 4 years into it,
she
was started changing.
Yeah. She was not happy. She let you know.
No, she didn't let me know, but I could start to tell. So that's the danger, right? And I think
I was looking to come and tell you that they're not happy. They let you know in other ways. That's why I'm asking you. How did your wife feel about it, and did she let you know she wasn't happy?
Yeah. So I'm sure she was not. So we've talked about it a lot now, but at the time, it was. You can just tell that there's some shifts, but part of it is you grow apart. Like we never really grew that close as we could have, because I was gone basically as soon as we started getting married. But by the end of it, especially after we had my first son, like there's 3 goals I came out of college with. And this plays into anybody that's listened to my podcast. You've heard this before, but 3 goals I had coming out of college. One was I wasn't going to get divorced. So I come from a divorced family, learned a lot through that. And I said, I'm not going to do that, at least because of me, right? I can't control someone else.
Amen. Amen. That's a powerful freaking stand you took for your family. Good on you.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate it. We're good now. But I said, I'm not going to get divorced. I'm not going to leave my kids, and I'm not going to go bankrupt because of my own stupid decisions. Stuff happens.
Those are 3 very powerful commitments. And I think a man listening to this episode right now can learn something. Those are 3 very powerful commitments.
Well, I appreciate that. It was, in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, this cool. Yeah. It's going to be smooth. Right. So, and for a while it was, but by the end of it, there was a time where I remember 2 things happened. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I lived in Denver at the time, but I landed in Denver airport. Well, before I landed, I was flying from DC to Denver, and this is later, like 2017. And the years prior to that, after the recession and everything, I was one of the youngest guys, like always flying. So it was me and typically more tenured guys that were flying. Later, I saw more young guys flying again. But when I was in Dulles Airport and I see all these younger guys, and this is when like FaceTime had really kind of taken off more than it used to be. And I saw these bunch of dudes, nobody can see me, but I'm holding the phone in front of my face. Like if you've ever flown Southwest, imagine you're in the Southwest line. All of a sudden you see a bunch of guys holding these cameras up to their phone at the same time. It's like, what the heck's going on? Like, what's happening here? It was about 6:30, 7 o'clock in Denver.
For you to see that.
It was interesting. And I didn't know what was happening. And then I realized FaceTime fatherhood. That's what's going on. They're saying goodnight to their kids. And so that was a kick in my ass right there. And then I took the 3.5-hour flight or whatever it was, landed. It was like midnight something. And as I was walking out, I saw the gate for Nashville. It was probably for a flight for the next day, and said Nashville, and that's where we're from. And we had talked about like being closer to family, because all of our family's here. And it just all kind of hit me. I was like, oh crap. I have just all at once hit me. I am at the risk. I've already left my kids to a degree. My son, we were pregnant with my daughter at the time. I left my kid, and I'm on the verge of getting divorced. I've about busted all 2 of the biggest 3 goals that I said I wouldn't do. And so that was my turning point. And I said, okay, we're going to make a change, because jobs will change, most likely, for many people, whether you want it to or not. Sometimes, stuff happens, jobs change, but I made it for me a point that was not going to change. So ultimately, changed career paths and moved back to Nashville, and was very fortunate to find a new opportunity. But that was a big turning point for me, and really, I'm proud of it, but it also sucked because my identity was so wrapped around what I was doing. And I was the youngest key manager in a very large organization and had all the quote unquote perks of the travel life and all that stuff, but I was pretty empty. So my circle of men was not great. It took me about a year or so to really kind of get my identity back on and live with my wife full time. And then I was like, I need guys around me. I need good men around me. So I just went on a relentless pursuit to find them, because guess what? Most guys are not going to come to you because it's awkward. It's, whatever. You have to go and find them and step into the awkward and be bold. And when you do, I'm letting you know, when you find the right guys, and you're going to find some guys and it won't click, so to speak. But when you find those guys, you are going to be smarter, stronger, more confident, and also less lonely. And I say that in a way of when we don't have a check and balance system for our own thoughts, then the narrative usually doesn't go super positive. It can either be hyperinflated or it can go the other way, which is what I've found too often is happening, is that you don't have a positive narrative. And I think it was Einstein that said, a problem cannot be solved with the same level of thinking that created it.
Yes, he did.
So that's why I need men around me.
Brilliant quote. Now, this is a very, very powerful conversation, Zach. I really appreciate you revealing your story, because I think people learn from these stories much more effectively than they learn when we just simply share concepts with them.
Sure.
And I'm enjoying the latter half of this podcast a lot more than the beginning of it.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Zach, your podcast, Skill Dad Podcast, is one that men ought to check out, ought to listen to. We're going to make sure we put that in the show notes. And I run Sovereign Man really to be a place where men can have a brotherhood and can find their men. And I'd like to invite you to come to one of our meetings as a guest. I'd like you to come and check it out.
Yeah.
I think the men would be men that you would go, yeah, these are good men. And I think the men would say the same about you. So
I appreciate the invite.
I'll talk with you about that offline.
Yeah.
You're a smart man. You care deeply about men, fathers, children, and you've taken the time to become the best version of you that you can become. And I can see that, and I respect that greatly. And I thank you for coming on the show today. It's really been great having you on here, bro.
Absolutely. And thanks for doing what you're doing. The more we can get guys surrounded around the same banner, man, what a cool world we're going to live in. And it's just
I'll tell you what, man, I know you don't want to get political, and we'll wrap the show up with this. I think the election of Donald Trump last week was men stepping up and standing up in a very, very big way. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's about fucking time. you know, the last few years, men have been under attack and assault by all these radical, crazy forces, godless forces, in my opinion. And they just about had enough, and they stepped forward. And I remember, I was listening to Elon Musk's on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I listened to the entire episode. And this was released the day before the election, last Monday, a week ago today. And Elon Musk basically said, look, we need men to show up because men don't show up. Women, 54% of the electorate's usually women and 46% men. That's a big gap. And Elon said, look, women support Kamala more, men support Trump more. If men show up, we win. If they don't, we lose. That's basically what he said.
Right.
And I just sat there and I said, it's an interesting observation. In my own opinion, I didn't think women were supporting Kamala as much as the polls were saying, and it turned out that I was right.
You should be a pollster.
Boy,
about as accurate as some of them, if you can.
Dude, I do. What I thought was going to happen was a lot closer to what actually happened than what most of the pollsters said. So I'll say this: I'm in university. I studied international politics, and since then, politics has been a passion of mine, particularly U.S. politics and Canadian because I live in Canada. But I saw on Tuesday Musk, because he has access to data, was posting on X. He said men are showing up in record numbers. And I'm like, and the post was almost like a little bit of a surprise. Like he was a little surprised that was happening. And I'm like, hey, Elon, why are you surprised? You're a man. You know what's going on in the world. I'm not at all surprised. I kind of figured men would crawl over broken glass to go vote in that election. There was nothing that was going to stop me. I have to stay in line the 30 hours? No problem. I'm not leaving. I got a cup. I'll piss in it. I'm ready till I cast my ballot.
Ready to go.
Because men were at a place where they realized that this was it. They had to stand up and be counted, or else everything that the left was saying about them was going to be proved to be true. And they stood up and they were counted. And men voted in numbers that they've never voted for before in an election last time. And I think it's partly because there's men like you, men like me, men like Larry Hagner from Dad Edge, men like Ryan Mickler from Order of Man that are stepping up, sounding the alarm, and calling for men to step up, all men to step up. And I think inside the breast of every man, there's a warrior, there's a badass within that is there. He may be dormant, but you challenge him enough, he's going to come out.
Oh, yeah.
And when he comes out, look out. Look out. You ain't going to stop him. Nothing's going to stop him.
Right.
And to me, that happened last Tuesday, but it also happens in you. I'm listening to you and what you said and what you did and those 3 powerful goals that you set for yourself. Never going to get divorced, never going to leave your kids behind. Right? What was the 3rd one?
Not going to go bankrupt for my own stupid decisions.
Not going to go bankrupt from a dumbass decision. I just thought, I listened and I go, that's a man. That's a man drawing a line in the sand, making a fucking powerful declaration. And I'm like, my respect for you, when I heard those 3, just went from here all the way up to here. And I'm like, yeah, this is a dude I can hang with. This is a dude I'd fly down to go to be with in Nashville, shoot some guns and have some laughs with. You know what I mean? Just because. Yeah. Because that's the kind of man you want to know and have in your life. Yeah. And that's important, in my opinion.
Well, I want to tap on one thing you said, and I'm going to illustrate, and then we can, wrap this and do it again sometime. It's fun. How do I want to put this? Okay. So I found something over the last couple of years and just went and I was like, I'm going to make some stickers. Why not? That stickers are cool. Everybody likes stickers, whatever. So I've got these stickers and I'll show you. So Skilled Dad sticker, but
nice.
I don't really do it to like go say, hey, go listen to my podcast. This is what I use it for. And it's the most beautiful thing. I love it because something you said about when guys get fired up. Now, what only kind of challenging thought is right now, like people can get fired up about a lot of different things. How about we get fired up about the same thing? So let's build our team and then get fired up together. And so what we do is around being dad. But if I see a guy doing something really cool and he's got his kids, or he's just struggling and he's got his kids, and I'll use the example of I was going to Phoenix. I was in a layover. The layover was supposed to be an hour. I had all my kids, went to the food court, and it ended up being a 4-hour layover. It was just ridiculous. So I'm trying to get food for my kids. I see this guy over there, big dude, young guy, has a little baby by himself, and he's just rocking the baby, trying to get to chill out. I walk over to him, I give him the sticker. I say, hey man, I just want to give you something. And I just give him the sticker. And so there's 3 phases that happens every single time. I give somebody a sticker and it's usually looks at me like, are you trying to sell me something or are you a threat? Do I need to fight? Like, do I need to wrestle up? Who are you? Because we're not used to random people coming up to us. I'm that guy now, apparently. The second thing is they see it and they immediately smile. Almost, I've had one dude, and my wife was with me. It's so cool. We're in Vegas, and I handed these cool stickers out, and he was like, "No, I'm good." So that's fine. One dude out of probably 500 of these things. That's not bad stats. But the third thing is the shoulders fall, and I see a wall fall, and they're like, "Oh man, thank you," because there's recognition. It's just one dude to another. I don't have an agenda except to celebrate you. And I want you to believe, whether you are or not, I want you to believe that you can be a skilled dad. And everybody takes that and puts it in their own way. So something you said.
You got to send me a sticker now, damn it. Like, you got to send me a sticker. I need a sticker.
Bro, I got you. I'll send you a stack of them, and I want you to hand them out. I want you to have the same experience.
You got it.
The fourth thing that happens sometimes is that some men are starving so much for some of this interaction that all of a sudden they will just talk. And so I'm not a psychologist, but I will talk to a dude. And if I ever talk to you, if you're listening, like, I'll encourage you, I'll support you, and I will also challenge you. And I hope you challenge me too, because challenging thought, if every one of us is the same, then somebody's not needed. But you mentioned that when men show up, we win. Well, I think one of the most dangerous ideas in modern society is that if men show up, they win. So what I'd say is, what happens when we show up together in community to our families, to our work in a good way, but also provide that, proper harmony. When we show up, we win. And that's why guys like you and me and Larry, I love that. But guess what? If you're listening, you're part of that too. You don't need a podcast for it. Get somebody a sticker, come up with your own thing. Just connect with people in a positive way. Because regardless of who is in office, because guess what? It's going to change in 2 years, which means in 2 years or in 4 years, in 2 years, we're going to start getting hit again with this whole never ending cycle. Whoever is up there is going to be up there, but it doesn't matter as much if we're all together here. And that's where I like to focus.
I'm going to beg to differ with you. I think it matters a great deal who's in charge. I think we need to make sure that we fight for the people we want in office, because when we don't, then the wrong types of people get in office and stupid things happen to all of society, like men and manhood and boyhood being denigrated, like girls having to have boys with mental problems pretend they're girls and go into their change rooms and mess with them. And it matters a great deal who's in office, and we gotta fight to make sure that the right sort of people win and the wrong sort of people lose. But everything else you said about men needing to get together and be in family, 1,000%, I'm all over that. That's very important. Just because someone's in office doesn't mean we give up our responsibilities to do what we need to do at a local level. In fact, the fact that Trump is in office means you got to do more at the local level, because you got him as an example. So you be the example now, stronger, better at the local level. Yeah. And that's what we got to do. That's what I think
you nailed what I was trying to hit. I'm not saying that's not important, because trust me, offline, we could talk all about that. And I do have my views, and I think it's incredibly important. I think the bigger idea is that when we are together on the local level, and then even beyond, because we all know people in different places, then I think that's an incredibly powerful thing that it provides in itself, its own form of check and balance. And I think that's a great thing, because it's a very fine line between the guy walking next to you and you. We're all running a very similar race. It's just a matter of, as soon as we start thinking that it's completely our own, we're missing out on an opportunity to be impactful and be impacted. Yeah.
1,000%, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Let's chat for a couple minutes offline. I'm looking forward to being on your show, and I'm excited to keep talking and do other things to help get the word out.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.